Alright, so we've been using ngrok with the Canvas Starter application, and the reason why is that whenever you build an application that a third-party server needs to talk to, you have to have some mechanism to allow that remote server to talk to your local development machine. And in our case, that remote server is Canvas, and we use LTI, which is the protocol that learning management systems use to talk to third-party applications. Now, it is entirely possible to get your LTI app to load inside of Canvas using just localhost. However, you will immediately run into all kinds of problems because Canvas expects you to provide a secure URL to load your application, so it needs to be SSL enabled. Now, if you're really, really ambitious, you can get SSL to work on your local machine. You can set all that up and get your computer to serve requests on 443 using an SSL certificate. But it's really a painful process. And so instead we started using ngrok because ngrok is not painful. It's very simple to use. You just come here to ngrok.com, you download it, you install it, and everything just works magically, or at least it used to. So we were using ngrok 1.0, which gave us subdomains on ngrok.com. Now, in the 1.0 version, all of your instances of ngrok were free, and it would just work, and everything was great. But then they released ngrok 2.0, which moves everything to ngrok.io. So that forces us to change all of our domains. Plus, you can only run one instance of ngrok at a time. You can run as many tunnels as you like, but only one instance. So it took me a little while to figure out how to run multiple tunnels. Because before, what we would do is just run a command that looked like this right here, where you run ngrok and you give it a subdomain, and then if you're using it with Foreman, we have this log parameter and tell it to log the standard out, and then you give it a port. And then when you want to start up another tunnel, we would just start another instance of ngrok. So these two commands right here on lines 8 and 9 run two instances of ngrok and set up subdomains, and everything worked, and we were all happy. However, with the new release of ngrok, that no longer works. So what we do instead, per their documentation, there's two mechanisms for starting up multiple tunnels. One is to set up a YML file, and you can see that I have that example right here commented out. I have since deleted the YML file, and I'm going to remove this line from the procfile.dev. One, because I want to only make our users have to configure one single file, which in our case is the .env file. But also because whenever we use the YML file, I found that ngrok would actually give us errors. It would tell you that you had to have a paid account to have subdomains. Not having problems setting up a paid account for our internal projects, the problem that we have here is the Canvas Starter app is an open source project. So I didn't want every user who ever wanted to use this application to have to sign up for a paid account in order to just get started. And so that became an issue. So we're going to remove the YML stuff, and we're going to just use their API. All right, so to use the API, the first thing we do is we tell ngrok to start up, and we give it this none parameter, because if it's none, then it's not going to start up any tunnels at all. It's just going to start up and start listening. And then we're going to run this Ruby script because it's easier to run Ruby than it is to try to get all the commands to work. So let's go take a look at this Ruby script. We've got this ngrok.rb right here. Now the first thing it does is we've got this wait method, which is the first thing that's called in the file. And what that wait method does is it says don't attempt to connect to ngrok until ngrok is completely initialized. So it just goes into this loop and it just sleeps for half of a second until ngrok becomes available on 4040. Now that's important because if you make the requests, and we just make the requests using curl, if you make those requests to ngrok before ngrok is started up, then the tunnels won't start and everything falls apart. This will actually, Foreman detects that the script didn't exit successfully and it shuts things down. So we wait for, excuse me, we wait for ngrok to start up. And then once that's done, we output this starting tunnels message. We build the curl command for the application and for the assets because we're running 2 servers here. And so we need 2 tunnels to connect to each one of those servers. And then we get the configuration for each of those from the environment. So you can see we have this app subdomain, an app port, asset subdomain, and assets port. Those come out of the env file, which is not committed to the project by default, but the .env.example file is. So when you get this, you'll want to customize the Canvas starter app to some custom domain and the CS assets to some custom value as well. You can also change the ports to anything that you'd like. They should match the ports that you're running those servers on. But if I remember correctly, I have configured the Rails application to read this. Oh, no, that's not true. Foreman will start the Rails application on 3040 because it's configured inside of here. And that's from inside of the procfile.dev, which you can see right here. That's the app port. So Rails will start up on the app port, and then Webpack will start up on the assets port. Okay, so going back into our script here, this generates a post, and so we are posting to the ngrok server and asking it to create new tunnels. ngrok is running on 4040 by default, and according to the documentation, you post to API tunnels. And if you want to see any of their docs, they're out here just off their website. It's pretty easy to scan through and figure out the API. And if you ever wonder what's going on, you can access all of these API commands through curl, which is kind of beneficial. And I'll show you one here in just a second. Okay, so after we generate those 2 command line, just the command line values we want to execute, we call system on app right here, and then I tell it to sleep for half of a second before I call system on assets. And the reason that I do that is I found that if I called these without a sleep between them, then it would cause a panic error inside of ngrok, and ngrok would die. So you have to give it some amount of sleep before you call it again. So if you hit it as fast as the computer can hit it, you'll cause it to crash. And then the last thing we do is we tell this script to go to sleep forever. We don't give it a timeout. We say you go to sleep and you sit there in the background. If you don't do this, then Foreman will detect that your script has exited. Now Foreman expects to start up servers that run forever, and then if any of those servers exit, it shuts down everything. So in this case, if you exit, Foreman will detect that your script has exited and it will shut down everything, which is not what we want. So we just tell it to go to sleep, and then it doesn't consume any resources, and Foreman is happy. All right, so just really quick, let's show how you use this, because at the end of the day, you won't have to worry about any of the ngrok code. You can just say, all right, this is done. I never have to worry about this again. The only thing you'll have to do is edit the .env file. All of the settings for the Canvas Starter app are contained in the .env file. So every time we create a new project, you'll take this .env.example file, rename it to .env. Do not commit it, because the .env is specific to each developer's machine. Like I say, you'll want to set your own subdomains, because like I'm currently running on the Canvas Starter app one, and if I'm running on it, somebody else can't run on it because domains are unique. All right. Now, if I come out to the command line, I can run, let's make this a little bit smaller, this command right here, which is foreman start -f, give it the procfile.dev, which is this file right here. And this file is going to tell it you need to bring up the web server, which is Rails. It'll run on that port from the env file because Foreman is really cool and it sets up the environment based on the .env file. It will run this webpack command, which brings up a webpack hot reload server. So as you're developing your React code, all of the components, any change in a component will automatically trigger the change in the user interface and reload just that component. Also very nice. At some point soon, I'll be removing the ngrok 1.0 stuff. If you do want to continue to use ngrok 1.0, you can just uncomment those lines and then comment out the ngrok 2.0 lines. But there's really no reason not to move to ngrok 2.0 now. And you can see there's the two pieces we already talked about, starting up ngrok and then setting up the two tunnels. So I will fire this up. And you can see that it's starting up Rails, it's starting up Webpack. So there's the booting unicorn, so there it's starting up Rails. Webpack's doing all of its stuff. And now if I go out here, I can say startup in canvas starter app.ngrok.io, and the page loads. So there's the canvas starter app. Now if you ever want to see what tunnels are currently running on ngrok, you can use this curl command. And then you go through their documentation, it shows this list tunnels. So it's a get to API/tunnels. So we're going to go check that out. We're going to do a curl localhost 4040 API and then do tunnels right here. And sure enough, there is a JSON document that describes the two tunnels that are running. And then if you want to bring up other applications that also use this same technique as kind of the base, I do believe that you might have to comment this line out on the other ones because you already have an instance of ngrok running. You can try running it and see if it just says, oh, I'm running already, everything's fine and dandy. Plus, if you need to add more ngrok tunnels, you can do that in the ngrok Ruby file, simply by just adding a new tunnel here and then doing the sleep and calling the system piece right there. All right. So, are there any questions on how to use ngrok 2.0 going forward in our projects? Okay, I guess maybe everybody's like, oh, this is super simple. Yeah?
We can't really go back to ngrok 1 because the LTI key was updated for ngrok 2.
That is true. We have updated the LTI key, so ngrok 1 is not even really an option anymore. But that's okay because everybody has access to ngrok 2, and only half the team has access to ngrok 1.0. Okay. So hopefully that made sense. If you have questions, let me know.
Thanks, man.
It works. We'll talk to you guys later.